This is Greg Troutwine with Offshore Engineer TV, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Matt Grove, the Regional Segment Manager for Offshore for Seequent, here to discuss the Seequent and Bentley partnership and what the offshore energy market can expect to see from it. So, Matt, to start us off, can you just provide a brief professional background with insights on your responsibilities today at Seequent?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Yeah, of course. So having graduated from University of Plymouth in the UK some many years ago now with a Bachelor in Earth Sciences and Astronomy, I did a short stint in the UK North Sea as a geologist on an oil rig, and then joined Seequent, which is 19 years ago now. So in that time, I've gone through many different roles and had many different responsibilities. And as our company has changed and morphed into what it is today, I've been offshore for pretty much most of that time, servicing our customer base and growing that. But now I'm the regional segment manager within EMEA region. My responsibilities are very much kind of understanding where the industry is going, what Seequent should be doing to position ourselves nicely within that space, but also with a commercial lens as well. So, looking after account managing some of our larger customers and those who show perhaps, interesting potential for us as well as we explore new and interesting avenues in the offshore space.
So why don't we dig a little bit more into the Seequent and Bentley partnership? Specifically, what makes it transformative for offshore projects, and how specifically does integrated ground modeling aim to help reduce risk offshore?
Yeah, so if you imagine for a minute quite a rare workspace where you have a flow of data very much from the beginning of entering the geoscience world, getting your data, acquiring it, understanding it, processing it, all the way through to kind of managing your assets. When you bring Seequent and Bentley together, and draw a line across a page, everything above that line would be the Bentley space, that kind of built environment, understanding your assets, monitoring, designing all your assets in the first place. Rewind a little bit, and everything below that line is where Seequent fit. And all of the subsurface knowledge and integration that becomes part of that kind of foundation to any offshore asset is where Seequent really kind of excel. Join those two together, and as I say, you have that workflow of data where you're understanding the ground conditions, you're understanding what's below and holding everything in place. Then you get into the Bentley world where you can start to monitor that. What are the effects of what's happening when? And you're very powerful indeed. And very, very lucky that we find ourselves in that space now, where we can offer our customers such a broad spectrum of software application services, cloud hosting, you name it. There's lots to offer. But with regards to actually the importance of a ground model, picture a tree or a plant, something like that, with roots into the ground, and the beautiful tree plant in above the ground doesn't exist without that subsurface. And that's where Seequent producing that environment to bring together data, integrate ground modeling data, from the geoscience, across the geoscience, so geophysics and geotech, geology, understanding everything together, building that 3D environment so that you present that to managers and stakeholders and people who have a real interest in understanding that subsurface. It provides a very, very clear picture of what's going on down there.
Let's talk about something, an inherent hazard or risk offshore, and that's UXO, or unexploded ordnance. Obviously, it's a serious issue. So how specifically is Seequent helping to manage that risk?
So rewind, a number of decades now. Seequent partnered with the US Department of Defense, really to understand how they can clean up the earth of unexploded munitions, whether that practice ranges onshore, offshore, in combat, remnants from wars where we literally dumped things out of sight. So that partnership enabled us to kind of build software applications to detect unexploded munitions. You have a pretty significant hunk of ferrous material sitting in a background of, less dense ferrous material. It shines like a Christmas tree in an optimal environment. Not every environment is optimal. So actually providing the software, providing the tools and the expertise and the knowledge of my colleagues here in our technical teams, understanding where we can apply filters, what corrections we can apply, providing the knowledge of, well, actually that might be a boulder because it has ferrous material versus a munition, and the modeling that we can do, which allows you to distinguish between the two. But not also that, I mean, the same technology applies for cables and pipelines and things that are in the subsurface, which you can't see, that need detecting. We can't do everything in this space, but what we do is allow our software to accept formats from other customers and third-party applications. So the hydrographic surveyor, in this case, for detecting UXO offshore, has a toolkit and arsenal of many different software packages. As soon as we start layering up that image of, data set number 1, data set number 2, you start to grow that understanding of it's here and it's this shape. So that's where we're providing benefit, and it's a market leading product. Many people using it have done for a long time, and actually it's a pleasure to work with these people because it's clearing such an unfortunate risk from times past where these things are a real challenge, and we're building wind farms and putting infrastructure in the oceans where there's such a huge density of these things in the seabed, unfortunately.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Thermal conductivity of sediments and their effect on cable routing or cabling routing sounds really like something out of a next-gen infrastructure playbook. How specifically is Seequent helping to navigate this terrain?
So this is really exciting, actually. This is something, as a product of building a ground model, I wouldn't say we're repurposing old technology. That's a bad way of putting it. What we're doing is now we find ourselves in this position where Seequent has such a broad spectrum of applications and knowledge within the team. What can we do with all of this amazing kit that we didn't used to? So first of all, we can build ground models, and that's extremely valuable. But what now can we do now we have that ground model? What are the details that we can find? If we look here, what can we find within that ground model? And looking at the densities and the fluid flow and the dynamics and the stresses and strains analysis of particular sediments. And the cabling work that we've been doing, not only with that ground model, we can optimize a route, a plan from point A to B, because it's not as easy as putting a cable in a straight line. There's always something in the way that needs to be discovered or moved or averted. And then once we've got that, learning from existing infrastructure, existing wind farms where power is running through a cable, what happens to the sediments around that cable when you put a current through it and it emits a heat? How can we dissipate that heat away from that cable to stop that cable from failing? They have hotspots, they fail, they break down, and ultimately there's an expense to that because the wind farm doesn't generate electricity and it needs repairing. So minimizing that risk, understanding what the ground conditions are ahead of time before we lay the cable, so that we can optimize that cable route so that we can keep that asset running as long as possible with as few issues as possible. What to avoid, what to extract, a peat or a clay, not particularly brilliant when you're putting, a cable through it. Doesn't dissipate the heat as well. So how can we avoid those, or how can we, protect the cable against them? So applying some of our software with that ground model, additional pieces of information, how can we help our customers? Well, we can tell you where the hotspots are on your cable, and we can tell you maybe which sediments to avoid. And should you wish, expense, I know there's a cost involved, but if you dug it a little bit deeper and avoided this particular sediment, it'll last longer. These are the types of challenges we're talking with customers about. And customers that we have, very fabulous, very, very enthusiastic customer that is testing all sorts of stuff. They're creating new thermal conductivity meters, so that this sort of thing becomes a real cost saving to our developers.
If we can just kind of turn the talk to dredging now, dredging is an essential to it's really cornerstone to economy and infrastructure. How specifically does Seequent play in that space, and if so, how are you helping to modernize that industry?
So when we started looking into the dredging industry, it opened up that rabbit warren of possibility, I think, in that you have your traditional kind of reclamation. We're going to build an island or extend the land to build an airport, something like that. Port and harbour channel deepening and widening, but also what about contamination in a port, diesel spillages, things like that. What do you do once you've dredged it? What can you do with those sediments, inland waterways? So you're right. There are so many different economical and social benefits to having dredging in place that, again, as part of my role, I have to understand where Seequent fit. Having that ground model, having that understanding of the subsurface, no matter what data you bring into it, integrating it together, and I think it's safe to say that the dredging industry runs entirely on cost. If you dredge too much out, it costs you too much money. If you dredge the wrong sediment, it costs you money. It's no use to pump somebody. So understanding what's the sediment, what are we looking for, how deep do we have to go, what sort of angle do the banks have to be to stop that all coming back in again? So those are the types of things, specifically offshore, that we're looking at with dredging, understanding how much of what from where, and the types of grades as well. If we have preliminary information about that, what type of grades are we getting from the aggregates, and we can tell our customers about that up front. Working with smart excavators as well, we provide a depth. Those sorts of things, these new technologies are brilliant because they just stop digging where you tell them to. So if we can provide that depth to customers, which we can, then it's, that's a nice marry between, the theory of where is it to exactly what we're getting out of the ground. You can start to estimate the size of your discoveries and, your pits. And then you can really kind of give an indication of how much you're going to get out of the ground, the costs of which, and your cost savings. And if we complete that circle too, we come back to our UXO challenge. The last thing you want to be doing is dredging up anything explosive into the hopper. So it, we're kind of, we have so many fingers in different pies that actually that continuous workflow of, well, you need to do a UXO survey before you go dredging. Brilliant. You need to do your geotech. Great. We've got that too. You have that environment, that ecosystem of, the data doesn't have to be changed. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It doesn't have to be transformed. It flows from one to the next. And you have this beautiful picture at the end telling you exactly what you're going to expect.
Looking ahead, what is next for Seequent in the offshore space?
So I've talked very much about where we sit in the offshore renewable space. We have plenty of customer base in the traditional oil and gas, so we're helping there with early stage frontier exploration type of geophysics. So we're furthering those and making sure that that is maintained and very much looked at for those frontier areas. As much as we don't want to, admit that we're not getting more and more oil and gas out of the ground, it's a necessary evil right now. So we'll be doing that, but equally, we're doing lots with geothermal, CCUS, hydrogen, understanding all of these challenges. They're clearly on the forefront of where do we go next with regards to kind of generating energy. Nuclear, we're looking at, that's a bit of a civil challenge, but equally, as soon as you start looking at the foundations of these are one serious piece of kit, you do not need moving or subsiding. So those ground conditions are so important. And equally, the thermal dynamics of those sorts of things, understanding where the heat's kind of going. So that's that from a kind of a very near term future, but actually looking further afield, thinking about the ecosystem, a cloud-based ecosystem of development, storage, third-party integration, bringing data together, hosted in the cloud, so that yourself, your customer base, any stakeholder can kind of visit with, permissive access and contribute to making the world a better place. Sounds a bit cheesy, but actually giving people an environment that they can all come together to collaborate and make sure that they're making the right decisions for the earth and the commodities which we extract and the things we need to do upon it.
It's truly beneficial for us to catch up with clear tech leaders like Seequent. I appreciate your time. I look forward to talking to you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Greg.